is Walker. Roth and Herbert. The Tom Richards Trophy comes down under. His kick has retained the Bledisloe Cup.
Go for the line, man. And he gets there. Absolutely wonderful moment for the Australians.
July 2001. Rod McQueen stands down as coach of the Australian rugby team. He finishes on a high, his Wallabies clinching their first ever series win over the British and Irish Lions. It was the perfect send-off. It wasn't always smooth sailing though, and after an ordinary start to his tenure, he put some planning in place that would turn out to be revolutionary. Despite the ups and downs along the way, at the end of it all, the trophy cabinet was bulging. This is a tribute to a coach and his team who took Australia to the top of world rugby.
Hello everyone, I'm Greg Clark. Over the next 2 hours we're going to look back on the many highs and the occasional low as Rod McQueen takes us through his years as Wallaby coach. No one has a better success rate when it comes to coaching the Wallabies. Record crowds flocked to see his team in action. They gave us so much to be proud of, and at the end of his reign the game in Australia was in top shape, a tribute to his planning and organisational skills. The Rod McQueen Era, a celebration of some wonderful rugby achievements.
Like many successful coaches, Rod McQueen's career developed from humble beginnings here at Pittwater Park on Sydney's northern beaches, the home of the Warringah Rats. After playing 173 first-grade matches with the club, he went on to coach first grade for 4 years, taking the side to 2 grand finals. He had a perfect record as New South Wales coach in 1991, including wins over Queensland, England, and a record 71-8 victory over Wales.
Allen, Toms, Judy, straight through. Here comes the support. Roebuck. And Wales is going to concede 70 points in a match unheard of.
Ill health forced him to stand down from all coaching duty for a couple of years, but he re-emerged as the inaugural coach of the ACT Brumbies in 1996. It was the first year of the Super 12, and despite winning all their home games, the Brumbies just missed out on making the semi-final playoffs.
That is a dream finish for Joe Roth.
That's the best rugby you will see.
1997 was a different story. They finished second on the ladder and beat the Hurricanes in the semis.
Gregan! He's there! What a start! And what vision from Gregan and Roth.
A week later at Eden Park, the unbeaten Auckland Blues proved too strong in the decider.
Michael Jones, and he loves it.
But McQueen and the new Canberra-based side had done the unthinkable, a grand final appearance in just 2 short seasons.
Now Gregan pops it away, Rock on the clear. Joe Rock, he's away. This will be try number 15 and Super 12 for Joe Rock.
Not surprisingly, as the Greg Smith coach Wallabies plummeted to record losses against the All Blacks and the Springboks over a 2-year period, Rod McQueen was appointed Australian coach in mid-September 1997. It happened rather quickly, and according to McQueen, it wasn't a dream come true at first.
Surprisingly enough, it wasn't. Most other things I've done in my life, I've really had goals all the way through. But it's one of the few things that really wasn't something that was probably on my high priorities. It was something that really was an opportunity that came to me at a time I really didn't expect it. But having said that, it was a great honour, and it was something that obviously I've enjoyed over the years.
The start of his tenure was far from perfect. En route to Britain, they stopped over in Argentina for a 2-test series against the Pumas. It was a tough initiation. In the first test, the locals played above themselves. The Wallabies won 23-15, but the reviews weren't flattering. And they certainly didn't get any better after the Pumas caused a major boil-over in the second test. McQueen's Wallabies on the losing end of an 18-16 scoreline against an almost amateur outfit. McQueen admits that he had some doubts about the coaching job back in those early days.
Can Australia hold on? It's a try.
Well, I think it was a little bit before Argentina. It was about in the first week when I took on the job. Just the difference in my lifestyle, the fact that nothing was sacred anymore, the opening up from the family's point of view. And I remember having a chat with Liz and just wondering whether we'd done the right thing. We obviously sat down to make that decision initially, and it was just overwhelming, the amount of press and the lack of privacy, I suppose, in the first week. But having said that, going back to Argentina, it was tough. We'd talked about perhaps organising a style of play that we wanted to sort of talk a little bit more long term, and to lose that second game to Argentina was a fairly big watershed, I think, in the evolution of the Wallabies.
Time was against the new coach. He had just 1 week to prepare for a test against England at Twickenham.
Well, how did you turn it around? I made one of the many phone calls to you at your hotel in Argentina back then after that loss, and I think from memory you said something like, gee, I really don't have too many answers here. It's disappointing.
Yeah, no, as I said, as it turns out, it was very good for the team because it really opened up a few eyes, and I think it's fairly well documented now that it was pretty obvious our standards weren't up to scratch. We were about to go over to England and Scotland, and Ealesy admits coming to me now with a couple of the players and having a few concerns, and I was very happy about it at the time. But when I found out their concerns was that they were actually staying in Windsor and they wanted to stay in London and get a bit better nightlife over there, I've sort of bit my tongue and realised that we had a few problems. And I think that was the start of all of us really sitting down and having a good look at things and realising if we were going to be successful, we had to make a few changes.
Was the Brumbies connection a major issue?
It was certainly an issue. I think that we've been used to having a lot of player power. I'd certainly have always endorsed that as I went along. And probably I didn't realise that Queensland and New South Wales to an extent hadn't been used to that style of coaching, and so it worked out more by accident that the Brumbies were having a lot more input into things because they were used to having it. Wasn't their fault, but it was probably my fault for not realising early that I had to encourage the New South Wales and the Queensland players to also have an input and had to have a more balanced input across the borders to I suppose, an Australian way of doing things.
Regan again, chance here. Horan has got tune with him. Still Tim Horan. Regan was inside. And there's the first try. There's Rod McQueen and the rest of the Australian bench. It's slow ball now. Time for England to regroup. Horan to Ben Tune. The door was simply wide open.
Despite outscoring England 2 tries to none, the Wallabies had to settle for a 15-all draw. Once again, it wasn't all pretty, but at least it was a step up from Argentina.
Yeah, things were starting to look a little bit better, though I think it was still early days as far as our management was concerned. I think myself and Timmy Lane and Jeff Miller were all scratching our heads at that stage, starting to sort of sort ourselves out and work out what was working and what wasn't working and why.
Moving on to Scotland, and at long last some things started to click. Down 8-3 early in the game and locked up at 8-all at the break, the Wallabies, sparked by fullback Stephen Larkham, raced away to win 37-8.
Great play here from Larkham. Great skills from the fullback. No one in front. Stephen Larkham can do it. Fantastic skills from the fullback.
Australian scrum, trying a second shove. Nicol goes up the touchline. Here's Larkham. Chance for a counter. Elusive runner. He's beaten 6-7. Larkham again. What a try.
It was a step in the right direction, and with 4 tests under his belt, McQueen headed home for an off-season of planning, and he found plenty of things that would need to be tweaked before the 1998 test season.
Just about everything. We really had to look at where we were. We said our standards needed to be much better than that. Had some long discussions with the players, in particular John Eales and George Gregan. And there was a willingness and I think a determinedness amongst the players there to get it right also, which made life a lot easier. We didn't have to convince anyone that things had to change. We got Steve Nance on board, who had a league background, but more so was able to bring the type of fitness in that we thought was important for us. John Muggleton came on board full-time to make sure that we had our defensive coaching mechanism right, and then we looked to do things a little bit differently. I think I talk often about the fact that it was a an evolutionary process is the normal way things happen. In this case, it was a revolutionary process because things had changed so quickly over a short period of time since professions had come along. We really had to look at things a little bit differently, things out of the square. And that's where we came up with the idea of a home away from home, which was Caloundra, and that worked out very well. We looked at a number of venues, and Caloundra was the one that we settled on at that stage. It's now Coffs Harbour, but those early times at Caloundra were fairly significant in the building of the team. I think having the partners and wives and children there was also an important part to get the balance of life there a little bit for the players.
Did you have any trouble convincing the players, but more importantly, the people who were going to pay for all of this, the administrators? Were they supportive initially?
I think a little sceptical initially. John O'Neill, I've got to say, all the way through has always been very supportive, and providing that we could put together a business plan and say why we thought it was important, he would basically accept that, and that's been another one of the reasons I think that we've been lucky and reasonably successful along the way. But in this case, it was very easy to accept because we actually saved Australian Rugby Union about $100,000 in the preparation by going to the accommodation we had there rather than staying at 5 stars. So we certainly didn't have any problem from that. The players had an input into it, so they were also totally convinced, I think, from day one. When I say that, probably everyone's a little bit sceptical of anything that's new, but within the first week, I think everyone realised that it was the right thing to do.
The long-awaited opening test of the 98 season was at Brisbane's Lang Park. The opposition, if you could call it that, was England. The tourists were dreadfully undermanned, a third-rate side, and it prompted the then chairman of the ARU, Dick McGruther, to label it the biggest sellout by England since Gallipoli. He wasn't wrong. Australia 76, England 0.
Larkham. Daniel Herbert again, elusive. Benchu, halfway. Kick and chase. He's got the speed. Stephen Larkham. Oh, that was a terrible mistake. Now Australia will look to punish again. Horan's there. Benchu. It's all over. Is a very sad end for the England team. A triumphant one for the Wallabies. That is their highest ever test score.
It was McQueen's biggest win as Wallaby coach, but more importantly, he was happy with the way the players and the game plan came together.
It was Larkin's first game at fly half, and it was significant for the team because we had put a lot of time into the way we were playing the game. We were playing the game quite a bit differently, I suppose, to the way rugby traditionally had been played. And we'd been working on a number of combinations, new combinations, obviously Horan there and Georgie Gregan with the back row and new front row. And all of those things came together on that day. I mean, I think it was fairly significant that it was a very big score, but maybe if I look back now, it was probably had a lot to do with the way the team played that day. They played particularly well. I've seen it a number of times since, and they really clicked that day. So perhaps it wasn't just the opposition, because when you look at them, there's a number of players there, including Wilkinson, who sort of came out with that the Lions tour and played particularly well.
Scotland were next on the receiving end of the now confident Wallabies. In the first of 2 tests, Australia thrashed the Scots 45-3 in Sydney.
And Matthew Burke is across.
While the tourists put up a better fight in the second test in Brisbane, they never really threatened, Australia winning 33-11.
Bowman again at the front. So good aggressive driving play here from the Wallabies. Here's Larkham. Shallow back line.
Roth. Joe Roth. And it's Matthew Burke. June. What a spectacular try.
Good Scottish scrum. They've wheeled Australia across fields. Picked up by Willie O. Larkham now. Straight through. Nathan Gray. What a moment in his first test match.
It was 3 from 3 for the year, but the stage was now set for McQueen's biggest challenge to date. His first ever assault on the Tri-Nations. And first up, it was the All Blacks at the MCG.
New Zealand win the line-out ball, they drive ahead. So close here, there's Anton Oliver. Josh Kronfeld, they're over. It's a try. Again, it's slowed down. It's Kearns in close, well read by Craig Dowd.
Get off it!
Daniel Herbert's a battering ram. Now they're making metres. Here's a chance. Matthew Bird. Straight through the middle. Australia scrum. Again, looking very solid. Kefu charges ahead. Gregan now. There's the battering ram. Joe Roth. Gregan does well. Kearns. Up to the 22. Marshall tries to stop it. Here's Larkham. Herbert. Straight through. Daniel Herbert. It's another one to Bird. They're still 15 from halfway. It's been slowed up by the Wallabies. They're looking for Cullen. Here's Mertens. He wants Wilson. Gregan in front. He's just caught. And there's the try to Jones. Ian Jones gets his 9th Test try.
Burke landed 3 second-half penalties to New Zealand's 1. Full-time, Australia 24, the All Blacks 16. The Wallabies maintaining their winning streak in a match that gave the coach a great deal of satisfaction.
Yeah, that was terrific. And surprisingly, we really didn't talk about winning Bledisloe Cups and beating New Zealand. We talked about the type of standards we needed. We were in the mode at that stage to go all the way to the World Cup. So our goals were firmly in place for that, and the winning of the Bledisloe was terrific in Melbourne, and I think it was very good as far as the measurement from the team's point of view. We'd won a few games up to then, but we really didn't know how we were going until we played against New Zealand, and so that gave us a significant boost, knowing that some of the things we'd been working on specifically for that game had paid off.
The Wallabies and the fans were on a high after the MCG victory, but the following week in Perth, the Springboks made certain that there would be no Aussie celebrations this time, South Africa winning by a point.
Here's Larkham. Tune. What a start. Brilliant early strike by the Wallabies. Honeyball. He goes wide. Was it tapped forwards? Big clash of bodies. And offside play by Australia. So the defences are just calling the tune at the moment, and there have been some fiery clashes. Van der Westhuizen slams his way through the Aussie defence from a quick tap. Gregan now. South Africa's turn to hold on. Joe Roth. Great pass. Larkham. Tommy Bowman, 7 metres out, Gregan! What an offload! The boy from Barraba has given it to wee Georgie Gregan, the gov. And Australia back in the lead. It's going to be close. It's over. That was a stupendous kick from Percy Montgomery. Springboks back in the lead by 1. That's it! South Africa has won its first Tri-Nations match outside their own country. It really was a monumental struggle. The Wallabies had their chances to take this one.
Again, that was another significant game in the building of the team. We got ahead against them in Perth, and we went into neutral, and we started to become very defensive in the way we played. And I think, if I recollect, we didn't go for a field goal at the end of it, which probably could have won us the game. But in my mind, it was lost well before then, because we became extremely negative, and it was a good learning point for us. We always talked about that game whenever we started to become negative in the way that we played, and we wanted to always have a positive attitude, never stop attacking no matter what we were doing. So again, maybe that was a game that was good to lose. I mean, they're never good. They're never good at the time, but in the long-term aspects of things, it was probably a good one to lose.
The new positive attitude was obvious when they headed to Christchurch to take on the All Blacks. The Wallaby tries were all gems. The first to Tom Bowman.
Wallabies weighed in. Here's Gregan. Kefu running hard and straight at Oliver. Pick and drive by the Australians. Well met there by Randall and Ian Jones. Still, the Wallabies have it. They work it short side. Jason Little. Picked up by Bowman! Tom Bowman! What a try!
Then the try of the year. Maybe the try of the decade for the purists.
Robin Brooke spoiled. Gregan recovered brilliantly. Brooke managed to just get a hand on the Australian pass as they go low now back to halfway. Horan's gone into halfback. Larkham. Herberts, well wrapped up by Meyer-Hoffler. Michael Jones went in low. Gregan now. Jason Little wants a run. He takes off and makes 15. Gregan comes in. All Blacks try to spoil. Larkham again. Herberts. Bit of trickery by the Aussies as Crowley takes it ahead. This is a promising build-up. Here's Larkham. Jason Little steps beautifully. Kefu's there, so is Gregan. Inside the quarter. Crowley now. Tremendous continuity here from the Wallabies. Gregan again. Back to Larkham. What's he going to do? He steps. Well, they took a long time to tackle him. He sets it up again. Methodical build-up by the Wallabies. Horan spotting a gap. Cullen took him, ball and all. All Black backs committed. Here's Matthew Burke. Watch him. A big goose step. Merton's the tackler with Randall. Burke trying to get it back. Here it comes. Still inside the All Black quarter. Gregan to Larkham. He's dangerous. Accidentally bumping into his own man. He made 10 metres. The Wallabies clean out again. Gregan now. Daniel Herberts. He wriggles closer. New Zealand hold on. Horan standing wide. Larkham's in close, so is Burke. All Blacks read it well. Burke goes into maul. It may be a turnover. No, it's coming back, so that's just strength from the Australians. Burke saved the day that time. Kefu. Marshall the tackler. Crowley. Cullen in the last line. They're getting closer. Larkham now. Burke. Lovely squits to Roth. Picked up by Larkham. 5 metres out. Sensational ball retention here from the Wallabies. Kefu's out in midfield. So is Matthew Burke, the first receiver. Burke trying to crash through. He goes to ground. Ian Jones, the tackler. Australia have it again. They must have won a dozen rucks in a row here. Australia go ahead. 3 metres to go. New Zealand just absorbing this enormous pressure. Larkham. Try. Matthew Burke. It had to come. Matthew Burke gets his 15th try. And have you seen sustained pressure like that from a Wallaby team?
That wasn't the end of it either. Australia running in 2 more tries to secure a 27-23 victory.
Here goes Larkham. Herberts! Look at this for Little! Jason Little! Under the posts! The All Black back line was totally bamboozled. They didn't know what was going on. And in the end, they were humiliated. 7 metres to go. The Wallabies can score their 4th here. Overlap. It has to be for Horan. There it is, Larkham. Stephen Larkham has sealed it.
Christchurch would go down probably as one of the most significant games that I'd been involved in, because all the work, all the skills that we'd been putting together for that last year, 2 years, came together in that game, where our retention drills and our multi-skilling with the players, etc., all came together in that particular game, and it was, it was a great try. But we really did have the game generally under control all the way through. We played it quite differently to perhaps the way a lot of rugby union games have been played in the past, and it was extremely satisfying from the team's point of view.
A great day all round. Australia had clinched the Bledisloe Cup. We won on New Zealand soil for the first time since 1990, ending a 40-year drought at Lancaster Park. But we were still finding it hard to win a Tri-Nations match in South Africa. The Springboks scoring a try in each half at Ellis Park to clinch the Tri-Nations crown. Australia were outplayed and outmuscled, and they couldn't offer any excuses.
Definitely not. If I look back, that's probably one of the most significant beatings that we've had. I think that they are definitely a better team on the day. We felt we were reasonably well prepared. We actually prepared outside of Joburg and just came in on the last day, and I think probably we were a little bit too relaxed. We probably should have spent at least one day in the town getting a bit of a feel for the hype that was there and the sort of crowd that'd be against us with those sort of cauldrons over there. And we were caught a little bit on the hop, but certainly significantly outplayed on the day.
Things weren't looking much better 7 days later back at the Sydney Football Stadium in what was effectively a dead rubber against the All Blacks. The Wallabies were down 11-0 at the break.
Christian Cullen! He's there!
Matt Burke was having an off night with the boot.
A much more assured stroke. But again he misses.
John Eales took over the kicking duties in the second spell, landing 5 from 5.
He has not looked like missing.
But it was Burke who scored the match winner, injuring his shoulder in the process, an injury that would keep him out of rugby for 6 months.
Did it to New Zealand in '94, and the conversion could win the match. Burke looks to be seriously hurt here. Eales to put Australia in front.
It was a gutsy effort. Australia coming back to win 1914, our first 3-test clean sweep over the All Blacks since 1929. They were back on track after the disappointment the week before in Johannesburg.
Again, that was part of the building of the character of the team. I think very disappointed in ourselves and the way we'd played in South Africa, and a team that we had 1 week to prepare for that came back from South Africa and trained extremely hard for the first few days. All of the players' fruition, which was again significant of that team, eased off a bit coming into the game and then sort of went on with it.
Coming up, the World Cup qualifiers against our Pacific neighbours. The Wallabies end 1998 with a tour to Europe. We check out the busy start to the 1999 World Cup year, including the centenary test against England and the Tri-Nations. All that and more after the break, when we continue to look back on the Rod McQueen era. There was still plenty to look forward to in late 1998 with one-off tests against France and England scheduled for November. But prior to the tour, Australia, one of the big four of world rugby, found themselves playing World Cup qualifiers against some of the minnows. When the Wallabies lost to England in the '95 World Cup quarterfinals, it meant McQueen's team had to qualify for 1999, taking on some Pacific Island nations. They beat Fiji in a 9-try romp at Parramatta Stadium. Joe Roff turned in a man-of-the-match performance from fullback.
So Whittaker to Herbert. Here's Larkham. Joe Roff gets his first test try of the year. It's been a long time coming, but they didn't lay a hand on him.
Another mismatch followed, with the Wallabies running in 12 tries to beat Tonga 74-0. Manny Edmonds bagged 2 tries on debut.
Whittaker goes in, the backs want it. It's only a matter of letting it go. He doesn't have to, Manny Edmonds. His second test try.
But the night belonged to Jason Little, who scored 4 tries to equal the record with Greg Cornelson and David Campese.
Another one. Try number 4 to Jason Little. Easy pickings for the star Wallaby three-quarter.
If the Aussies thought they'd have another romp against Western Samoa in the final qualifier, they were in for a shock.
Can Crowley get his first test try? Who comes up with it? Is it Dan Crowley? He's been waiting since 1989 to get one. Who is it? He's finally done it in his 29th test match.
Australia led 17-5 at the break, but when Junior Paramore scored a runaway try early in the second half...
Junior Paramore! What a try!
The Samoans threw everything at the Wallabies. With 11 minutes remaining, Daniel Herbert finally put the result beyond doubt, and Australia had safely qualified in top spot for their World Cup pool.
Daniel Herbert's all the way! And that will snuff out this very brave challenge from Manu Samoa.
The Wallabies won 25-13, and the coach was happy to get through what he described as a very important assignment.
Well, once again, if you had seen our diaries that year, you wouldn't have seen the Bledisloe Cup being our goal or any of those issues. We were actually making sure that we were at our freshest for those island games, because if we had missed out on those for some reason and hadn't been at our best, we wouldn't have qualified for the World Cup, particularly in the position that we wanted to be also. So we put everything into that, and as it turned out, the last game was fairly hectic. It was a really tough battle against Samoa, and we had to pull everything out to get away with it. But again, it was all part of the character of the team. We played three totally different teams in that short period of time. It gave us a chance to give some of the fringe players a game also. We came away with it very happy that we'd qualified to get into the World Cup.
After an 8-week break to recharge the batteries, the Wallabies were up against defending Five Nations champs France, without the injured Matthew Burke, Tim Horan, Richard Harry and Ben Tune. That opened the way for Patricio Noriega to make his debut, along with Chris Latham. Two early tries had the Wallabies in front by 10-6.
Rough try. Now the Wallabies have a good line. This is Larkham. Tom Bowman, another one.
But the French hit back to lead 21-13.
Lombard, fullback to Bates. Great French reply. Huge lead there. At the front, they're over.
Then Tatai Kefu pulled off the try of the match, and the Wallabies were down a point at the break.
Tatai Kefu with a sidestep. Nearly there.
The only points in the second half came from the boot of John Eales. Australia won 32-21. The following week at Twickenham, the most demanding test season by a Wallaby side came to a close with an unconvincing one-point win over England. The locals scoring the only try of the match through centre Jeremy Guscott.
Now it's Dawson, out to Cat, Guscott, oh, try, magnificent.
John Eales landed his fourth penalty goal in the 72nd minute, and the jaded Aussies held on to win 12-11. They would always be vulnerable on end-of-year tours, but they were important trips in the overall scheme of things.
One of the issues I remember there was the centre combination where we had Nathan Gray and Herbert together. They played particularly well against France. It was also a significant time in France for the team because we went to Villiers-Bretonneux, and where the Australians lost so many lives in the First World War. That had a fairly significant effect on the team, and we were able to draw on that later on at the World Cup final. So that was the time that we had in France. I suppose going from there, the England game again was one of the many games that were close, but the team just came through. And the self-belief in the team was fairly significant at that time.
Since taking over as Australian coach, Rod McQueen's record was now 13 wins, a draw and 3 losses from 17 tests. The indicators were suggesting he was on the right track heading into the 1999 World Cup year. The Wallabies would play 7 tests before the battle for the William Webb Ellis Cup began in earnest. First up, it was Ireland in Brisbane, and the Wallabies were missing 2 stars. John Eales was sidelined after shoulder injury, and he was in a race against time to be fit for the World Cup. Fly half Stephen Larkham was also out of action while recuperating from an injury. The 2-test series against the Irish was seen as a good way for new captain David Wilson to ease his side into the busy international schedule, and things went to plan in the first test at Ballymore. Australia cruising to a 46-10 victory, with replacement forward Tiaan Strauss having a dream debut in Wallaby colours. The former Springbok captain came off the bench to score a hat-trick.
Australia out wide now to Strauss. Tiaan Strauss in his first test for his new country. Doing their best to pinch it, but can't. Here's Horan. Latham. Chris Latham. And Strauss gets his second. Centre field on the quarter. Horan goes right. Quick hands for Latham. David Giffen. There it is, a hat-trick for Tiaan Strauss. The perfect support man. What a debut. Coming on in the second half for Torai Kefu.
The second test was a different story. This time the Wallabies had a real fight on their hands. The Irish were determined to take some positives out of the tour, and they were encouraged by their first half effort, leading 11-9 at the break. And it was 2 tries apiece in the second half.
Back for Spooner and Horan. Luke to Strauss. Finally a man put into space by the Australian backs. Spooner again. Spooner himself. Here's Horan. Tim Horan gets Australia's first try. Now Australia has the Irish defence disorganised. Latham. Strauss did well to pick up for Cobain. Over they go. Latham. He has the legs. Bishop across. Chris Latham gets his first test try. The Lansdowne Cup. Beautiful Waterford crystal at stake here. Australia has clinched that trophy as O'Kelly surges towards the Australian goal line. Humphries now. Maggs. Humphries on the loop. This is Bell. Bishop is there. Can he do it? Justin Bishop got the try for Ireland, and that's a fitting reward. Quick heel. There it is. Maggs gets it.
Penalty goals helped Australia win 32-26, but for the second year in a row, they failed to impress in Perth.
Oh, I think, again, you can't always play at your best. I don't know whether we left our sort of our lesser performances have come in Perth, but it hasn't been through lack of support. We've always had good support over there, and surprisingly enough, Perth training sessions have been incredible because we've had upward of 2,000 people at our training sessions, and we haven't experienced that anywhere else in the world. So the enthusiasm over there has been wonderful. Accommodation, training, we've had no problems, but for some reason the performance hasn't been at its best.
A week later, England and the long-awaited centenary test at the new state-of-the-art Stadium Australia in Sydney, the venue for the 2000 Olympics. This time the English were no pushover and scored the opening try.
Big overlap. Have to score. Australia's defence just not at home.
Australia hit back with 2 tries to Ben Tune late in the first half.
Out wide to Roth. Numbers here for Australia. Tune. A straight sprint. He got it. Now the Australians crank it up again. Horan. Joe Roth. What a pass. Another one for Ben Tune.
Joe Roth increased the lead in the 48th minute.
Joe Roth. Gregan then to Horan. England on their knees at the moment. It's been a steady build-up. That's Cobain. Taken by Hill. Gregan probes. Joe Roth. Well, the tries haven't come too easily for Joe Roth. That's only his 6th try in his last 33 test matches.
David Wilson's controversial try 6 minutes from full time sealed it for the Wallabies.
Here's Herbert. Gus got the tackler. Cleared by Gray to Tune. Gregan. Back to Horan. Horan again. Just coming in off his left foot. They didn't put him to ground. Now Giffen. 4 metres to go.
They want it out wide. Wilson! David Wilson, the Australian skipper, has got the try. And that should clinch it in the centenary test.
Andre Watson beautifully placed. He said it was okay. He kept nodding to the referee.
Another try to Matt Perry in the dying seconds was some consolation for England, but Australia's victory delighted the coach.
Well, significantly, that's one particular test that I really thought about the end result. We'd never really talked too much about results as far as the Wallabies were concerned, leading right into the World Cup, etc. But that particular test meant a lot, and I think the significance of it was that if we lost it, there was 100 years between games. So we actually talked about that quite a lot, and I was actually probably more worried or sort of more aroused about that particular test personally than any other test we'd been into. Just the significance of losing a centenary test and having to bear that for the next 100 years. And we did talk about that particular time, and it was I know that England particularly, they weren't saying much, but they had prepared very, very well for that. In fact, I think the reason that they'd sent out an inferior team the year before is to make sure they had their players available for this test this year. They spent something like 6 weeks preparing for that test in Australia, up near the Gold Coast, a similar sort of camp situation to what we had. So it wasn't lost on me the amount of time that they'd been putting into winning this one. When we came away with that win, I really felt that was was good for the team, but more so good for Australian rugby.
Australia's 1999 Tri-Nations campaign started in great style at Brisbane's Lang Park. They downed South Africa 32-6 to give them 10 straight wins, equalling the record set by the Bob Dwyer coach Wallabies of 91-92. Playing at fly half, Tim Horan was outstanding, and he was rewarded with a try in the first half.
Horan! Tim Horan with sheer strength.
Matt Burke also scored in his comeback test. He finished the match with 17 points.
Just a matter of seconds before the break. Gregan now. Herberts! Bud Stratton with the try-saving tackle. Gregan again. They want it out wide. Matthew Burke!
Joe Roff scored 2 tries in the second spell to give the Wallabies their biggest ever winning margin over the Box.
Stefan to Blanche. Nathan Gray across. Gray has it. Here's Jeremy Paul. Joe Roff! What a pass from Paul! Gregan, Horan. Jim Horan claps it on. Joe Roff, number 2. Did you see the afterburners there from Horan? Australia out to a 26-point lead.
But celebrations were short-lived. A week later at Auckland's Eden Park, they were completely shut out of the first half as the All Blacks raced to a 22-3 lead. Andrew Mertens kicking a world record equaling 9 penalty goals for the match.
He's certainly on target tonight, Andrew Mertens.
Despite Australia running in 2 tries, the issue was never in doubt. New Zealand winning 34-15.
Ray has a go. Herbert. Herbert is sunning it away. Daniel Herbert under the bar.
Well, that was the famous blackout test, and when we arrived in there and went down the street and saw all the shops all blacked out and people walking down the street all in black gear, and as we even in the bus on the way to the Oval, it was amazing seeing the amount of support that was there. And it was a great deal. It was a great bit of marketing from the point of view of the New Zealanders. And as much as we prepared for that and really wanted to start off well, they just hit us very, very hard at the start, and we never really recovered. We had a couple of small mistakes that were made by a couple of players there, and they really pounced on that. It could have been a lot more, that score that day. That's the only sort of solace that we could take from it, the fact that it could have been much more significant than that, because they were just very much on top of us.
The Wallabies were really under the spotlight when they headed to Cape Town to take on the Springboks, who were dreadfully out of form, losing their 4 previous tests. They had axe skipper Gary Teichmann, with Joos van der Westhausen taking over. If the Wallabies were to be a threat in the World Cup, surely they could topple a South Africa side in a state of disarray. But it wasn't to be. The Springboks won a scrappy encounter, 10-9.
Van der Westhuizen, a chance now for Brayton Paulser, back to Van der Westhuizen. Van der Westhuizen, can he? He's just held up short. Still the Springboks have it. Who's going to play it? Is there a chance? Fleck goes. Fleck's got it!
That was probably our most significant loss as far as disappointing in the performance. You know, we'd come away from a loss and we really did need to win. There'd been no other time when we'd sort of lost 2 in a row as a team, and I don't think we did since then. But as it turned out, we were up. We thought we'd do well. We prepared. We thought well for that test, and it just didn't happen on the field. And there was a lot of soul searching done under that after that game. Perhaps we tried too hard. Perhaps we overdid it instead of just relaxing and coming back down, and less is better sometimes. We certainly did a significant amount of work on the training paddock and also off the paddock going into that game. And in hindsight, we probably overdid it. So by the time we were ready for that next game, we were pretty desperate.
So that just left one final hit out before the World Cup. Australia at home at Stadium Australia, taking on the All Blacks, who had already wrapped up the Tri-Nations. But the Bledisloe Cup was on the line. A win by Australia would be enough to retain the coveted silverware, and the match attracted a world record crowd of over 107,000. It was 1 try apiece, both scored in the first half.
George Gregan across. Mertens all the way. Oh, that's a soft try in the end. Australia badly exposed on the short side. Australia. Cobain got it. Big drive for the Wallaby 8. 4 metres to go. 3 to go. 2 to go. They're over. What a sensational surge there from the Wallaby forwards.
And Connors in his first test match on the run-on gets the try. Andrew Blades, give this try to Andrew Blades. He got him to change direction once the All Blacks had stopped them, and that gave Connors the chance to score the try.
The second half saw a determined Wallaby side outplay their opponents, and while tries were hard to come by, the final result of 28-7 meant Australia was again in World Cup reckoning.
26-10, 1980 at the Sydney Cricket Ground is the biggest margin. Matthew Burke, take a bow. You're a hero for the crowd tonight. 19-point advantage, and that really hammers in the final nail.
In that game, Rod Kafer came in, and he did a very good job. You know, an old head when it was required. He helped in the lead up. He's been very good with his strategies over the time. With Tim Lane and Jeff Miller, devised a plan, I suppose, that we all sort of stuck to all the way through. And again, significantly, I think that we imposed ourselves a little bit on New Zealand that day. But the more significant thing that I remember from that was the work that was done by the Australian rugby in answer to the blackout, and that was when we started to call for people to wear gold to the stadium, and suddenly we had the stadium filled with gold. We had John Williamson there, who'd worked very hard with the side significantly since the time that he'd seen, I think it was a test in Christchurch. He'd wanted to get back involved with the team, and he'd written a song for the Wallabies. He was also very keen to get the crowd singing Waltzing Matilda, so all of that came good on that particular day.
The preliminaries were over. After 2 years of planning and hard slog, the Wallabies were about to find out whether they were contenders or pretenders. After the break, we look back on the 1999 Rugby World Cup as the Rod McQueen era continues. Australia's tilt at winning the 1999 Rugby World Cup started in Ireland. Johnny Ills and Stephen Larkham were back in the squad that was based outside Dublin and grouped with Ireland, Romania and the United States in one of 5 pools. Coach Rod McQueen adopted a steady-as-she-goes approach, almost too relaxed at the start.
The World Cup was what we call our destination, and that it's something we'd been working to for 2 years, and we'd gone through our process, which was the beginning and then the journey. And so we carried a 40-foot banner with us, which read our destiny is in our hands, and we took that everywhere we went. Significantly in that, in the early days in Ireland, the medical staff had talked about making sure that we have a slow start and make sure that we settle in, because we've been working pretty hard. We played golf, I think, for the first day, and then that evening we had a Guinness with the sponsors over there with the World Cup, so we had a Guinness evening. And I was starting to get a bit worried because everything was getting a bit too relaxed. I think Joe Roff came to my room about 2 o'clock that morning and said he wanted to have a chat with me. So I opened the door and sat down and said, yeah, Joe, what can I do? And he said, I've forgotten. Walked back out again. So at that stage I was starting to panic from the point of view of a coach, but as it turned out, the next couple of days we started to get back into it. And one of the significant things about this team was the fact that there's a lot of larrikinism in there from the Australian larrikinism in there, but they were able to switch on when it was needed, and that did certainly always become a bit of an issue for me, because I was always saw myself as making sure that they were switched on at the right time. So we had a few incidents there from time to time, but none that were too bad. Considering we had 42 people there for that whole period during the World Cup, it was significant that everyone sort of put the team first, and we all got on pretty well. That was a very important thing. The other thing that came out of it was the players very early got together and decided that they'd pool the money. So it didn't matter whether they were players or reserves or players that didn't get a game. They all decided that as a group they'd get equal remuneration, which I think had a good reflection on the attitude of the team and the reasons they were there. I was very happy with that, and it wasn't publicised at the time, and as they didn't want it publicised. But again, that had a significant sort of, I think, effect on the team. The fact that they were all together for this one and they really wanted to take it out. We did take it easy early on, going into the games. We knew that we had to develop as a team. For instance, Eels and Larkham were only back newly back in, and they had to develop into the team mode. And so that as we went on, we wanted to sort of try a few things as we went, and we were always experimenting, always trying to get some feedback on the other games as to the way the game was going, because there were a few law changes in there earlier, and we were monitoring what was happening in the other games to get a bit of a feel for what the referees were doing.
In the opening match against Romania at Belfast's Raven Hill ground, Australia cruised to a 57-9 victory. Tatai Kefu scored a hat-trick of tries.
Lovely little slick ball there, and it's the second Australian try, charging in for it. Tatai Kefu.
And Gregan will feed it like feeding the wolves. Never mind Wallabies. They said they were hungry, and hungry they are. And they'll go for the push here, and they'll look for someone to drop on that ball. And is he there? Everybody wants it. Gradually it a slicing run through the middle. Burt wanting to be in there again too, and the Romanian line must surely give way here, and it's going to be a hat-trick, his first in international rugby for Tatai Kefu.
The first real test in pool play came at Dublin's Lansdowne Road. The Irish were quietly confident of causing an upset, but despite playing well below their best, the Wallabies won 23-3.
Easy for Gregan. Now off to Toon from deep. Beautiful running. The support is from Wilson. Ruff is outside him. This is lovely play. The two props involved too. Harry and Blades, but is there a turnover? Kefu. Superb. Mallon for the supports. Richard Harry over the 22. Can Australia finish it off this time? Timmy Horan will do. Meanwhile, Kefu from the Channel 1 ball. Gregan brings in Ruff. Great chance here. Horan gets the pass out wide. It's Bantoon. That's the clinching score then. But from wide out, It's 4 from 6 then. Ending the game on a better note, Matt Burke.
They were now certain to finish on top of their pool, but it was the end of an era. Veteran hooker Phil Kearns suffered a career-ending foot injury and was soon on his way home.
For the time he was there, he left a sort of fairly heavy mark on that team that I'm sure that they carried through to the final of the World Cup. And it was fairly significant when Phil decided that he'd go home. He obviously could have stayed there, but I think he made that decision based on getting back to his family and also letting the players sort of get on with the job. But he made a significant contribution, I think, later on when we had a movie that was sent over with a lot of the sporting stars on there and wishing us all luck for the World Cup final when we got there, and Phil came on at the end of it. He's sitting in his lounge room, and one of the phrases we always kept there for a team's defensive area was keep them nude. And at the end of the conversation, Phil stood up with absolutely nothing on, and all the players were sort of deeply emotional from the reaction they'd got from all the sporting stars before that. So he certainly broke the mood, and once again it was it was pretty timely.
It was Tassi Mwanga who was in there, but now the first opportunity of a break for Australia. If he looks to his right, that could well be a score. Williams storming towards the line, but has he got the pace? Has he got the strength? He hasn't, but he gets the ball away. Try number 1 for Australia, and it's gone for Stephen Larkham.
The 55-19 win over the United States in Limerick confirmed that Australia would play Wales in the quarter-finals.
Clever little skipping around the play and the burst through the middle here. And if he's got the legs, he might go all the way. Latham, he'll be very generous indeed. And he'll give the score to Chris Whittaker from the Randwick club. Whittaker's second for Australia. His only other one came against Tonga. I think this one means just a little more to him in the World Cup.
Cardiff was like a pressure cooker for the Wallabies. A semi-final spot was at stake, and high-profile New Zealand-born coach Graham Henry had whipped his Welsh players and fans into a frenzy. A sellout crowd turned out at the new Millennium Stadium, and Rod McQueen's men could be excused for being on edge.
Yeah, it was pressure. I think all that week the Welsh had been talking about Welsh passion and the fact that they were going to come through with the passion, and I talk about this a lot because passion is sometimes a really misused word. I think passion sometimes can, in this case, probably can mean maybe we haven't done our homework, maybe we're not fit enough, but we're going to try and belt the hell out of them for this game, and our passion is going to come through. But a passion that we had was something that had been developed over a long period of time. The passion that the players had, I think, started in Caloundra and it built. I think it was added to by some of the decisions that the players made, some of the sacrifices they'd made along the way. And our team had a lot of passion. Wasn't talked about a lot, but I think that's what carried us through in that match. It was a significantly close match, but again, I think when we talked about it at half-time, when we came off at full-time, we did feel that we had it under control.
Australia entered the World Cup dreams of host Wales with a hard-fought 24-9 victory. The match still in the balance with 15 minutes remaining. The Wallabies scoring 3 tries to none.
They've got an overlap on this side again. Wyatt misses his man. Regan inside, and he's over. Try Australia. Sloppy play by Wales to lose the ball in the first place, and then brilliant work down the blind side from Australia. Giffen, Sinkinson lines up his man, but out goes the ball to Herbert. Larkham, chip and chase. Has he got there? Yes, he has. Then Tune goes screaming in for what might well be the decisive try. Tremendous speed. Horan, can he get away? Yes, he can. Sinkinson can't get him. Bateman tries. The ball goes forward. Well, the referee saying it wasn't a knock-on. David James had surely touched that down. Well, if there was any question of it, Scott Quinnell going mad at the referee claiming there was no touchdown and giving the try.
A wonderful break by Timmy Horan, but the Welsh players are livid with Colin Hawke with one or two of his indecisions today. They lost the ball in the tackle, and again David James being held back and pushed off the ball a little bit there.
So it was off to Twickenham for a semi-final showdown with South Africa.
Back it goes to Skinstad. They miss out. De Beer picked up. And away goes Horan. Chips it away, gets it away from Kaiser. Back goes De Beer, and he has to chip it into touch. Gregan Larkham back inside to Herbert. At pace, it's Burke. Bounces his man off, gets it wide. Horan flips it on to Tune. Lovely handling by the Australian backs. Now they need to get it wide quickly. Larkham goes himself, wriggles through two men. And Derek Bevan signalling a penalty if they need it. They do. They came round the side. Horan gets free. Great run from Horan. Looking for support. Sets it up instead. The Australians are there. Gregan gets it wide. And a penalty again against the South Africans. Interfering. They weren't getting back cleanly. Off the top, it was Van der Berg. Oh, and Skinstad had to knock that back. Free kick. Given by the referee. Too many in the line-out. That was for numbers.
Yes, you can see Australia there. 3 men in the line. Mr. Bevan's right. It's a free kick as a technical offence.
It's another slow ball. Finnegan drives through two men. Sets it up very well indeed. Now they've got a quicker one. Matt Burke can't find a way through. Good defence from South Africa. They have it again. Gregan! Penalty to South Africa. Clinging on Gregan. It's no try. Some of the crowd think it is. But it's a penalty, South Africa.
You're right, John. The crowd are wrong. They think it's a try. It isn't. There's Georgie Gregan. It opens up for him just for a split second. South Africans don't know the words surrender or defeat. Closed again straight away. He penalises Gregan for holding on.
Timmy Horan. Back he comes. There's room through there. He's way and clear. Can he find support? Yes, he can, from John Eales, his captain. Quick ball this time. They've got men over if they can get it wide. Joe Roth. Herbert. Good defence again. The South Africans didn't panic. But a penalty, offside in front of the posts. 18-12 they lead.
Yes, they deserve it. Last 10 minutes, they really have played some superb rugby. It was all South Africa at the start. But this second half, they absorbed the pressure and then applied it back on the Springboks.
Joost van der Westhuizen, so strong. Visagie comes back to scrum half. De Beer running for once. The Australians going in, trying to get a hand on this one. Have they got it? Yes. Oh, it's a penalty to South Africa. Over it goes. South Africa back to within 3 points.
Tries were hard to come by, and after a tension-filled 80 minutes of regular time, it was locked up at 18 all, 6 penalties apiece.
Yanni de Beer, a last look at the posts, collects himself. Hits it. He's got it! A sensational kick. And Yanni de Beer's nerve held. And we go into extra time.
We went into that game, we'd actually talked about what would happen if it was a draw, and what the rules would say. In fact, if it had been a draw after we'd played that additional period of time, we would have won because they'd had a player sent from the field to play. So we'd actually already discussed that before the game. One of the messages that came out that game was from Steve Waugh, who said there's only one thing better than beating the South Africans, and that's tying with them and beating them after, which is a fairly significant message, because that happened with the cricketers, obviously, but it also happened to us, as it turned out. So we were ready for that, and the discussions we had at full time were very indicative of that. I think fairly well in control, and the players ran off the field. I think I stressed at the time that we didn't have to go out there and score straight away. We had to make sure, wait for opportunities to come and not rush things, but how important it was not to give penalties away, because at that stage that penalties were everything in our own half. And as the players walked out in the second half, Tim Lane mentioned to Steve Larkham if he had an opportunity to take a shot at field goal.
And Larkham didn't hesitate when he had a chance to break the deadlock in extra time, writing his name into Australian rugby folklore.
He certainly has. I can't believe he could hardly stand on that foot. He looked up and he just whacked it. Oh, it's a magnificent kick.
Well, a fantastic opportunist drop goal. That is his first ever drop goal in international rugby, and not one of the Australian team had dropped a goal in international rugby before that.
It was enough to break the South Africans' spirit. Australia eventually winning at 27-21. And while they thought they'd be playing New Zealand in the final a week later, the French had other ideas.
The game is the World Cup history.
We're a side that had prided ourselves in making sure whatever happened we were prepared, and we'd always talked about what happens next. And in this case, we got it wrong, because we did not even think that there was a chance of us playing France in the finals, and we'd actually directed the majority of our time practicing for what we were going to do in the final against New Zealand. We knew a fair bit about their play, the patterns that they played. And we actually felt quite confident that we'd developed a style and a game plan that we thought would beat New Zealand. So whilst we were watching the game unfold from our hotel room in that second semi-final, we hadn't realised the significance until the game was over, and suddenly it just dawned on us that we were actually going to play France, and that sort of that was quite a scary thought at that stage.
All of a sudden back to the drawing board, and in a hurry.
And so that was probably, from our point of view, good to some extent, because it meant that we had to just worry about ourselves, and we've devised a plan that we were going to impose onto them rather than a specific game plan that we had for other teams. And we trained that way all week as to how we were going to play the game, and worried more about ourselves and trying to concentrate on their weaknesses, I guess, along the way.
The Australians' destiny really was in their own hands now. Rod McQueen has no trouble remembering the week leading up to the World Cup final against France in Cardiff. They are memories that will live forever.
Well, earlier in the week, we had a fax that came in from Major General Cosgrove. At that stage, we were involved in East Timor, and he'd said what an inspiration the Wallabies were to the soldiers in East Timor. So we held that back and thought that was obviously just an amazing fax that had come over. We also had some information that we'd sought out on Villiers Betonnier. And they sent back a bit of the information as to actually what happened there. Significantly, what a machine gun battalion leader had sort of said to his troops just before they went out on the field of battle. And we got Buddha Handy in to also hand the jumper over, as had become a tradition with the classic Wallabies. So those three things, I guess, were fairly significant in the lead-up. I think Jason Little had a quote there from Herb Elliott that he'd put in. We'd done so much homework to that stage that it wasn't a matter of talking, last-minute tactics, etc. We really knew that we really just had to put it in on the field on the day. We'd worked for this for so long. One of the things I remember during the week was players coming up to me and saying, I've got to stop myself thinking about what would happen if we won this, which again was, I suppose, the way that we'd trained all the way through, and that is not thinking about outcomes, just thinking about the way we were going to play the game. And I must admit, I started to think a little bit about that too, but really had to push myself to think only about make sure that we got it right and got our preparation right. So leading into the game, we went through all those areas of the game. Buddha got up in the hotel room, talked about the significance, how proud he was as to being able to hand the jumper over, how all of Australia were behind them. We had a room totally full of emails and faxes from all walks of life through right around Australia. John Mackay, the team manager, read out the fax from East Timor to the players, and I held back the information that I had, which was based on this machine gun battalion. And I think one of 5 different statements he'd mentioned to his battalion was, we will remain here live, or we will remain here dead, but whatever, we will remain here. And before the players ran out on the field to play, that's the last thing I said. I don't think anything else needed to be said, because by that stage they were so ready for that game. They'd been thinking about it for 2 years. They'd made a lot of sacrifices, not only them, but obviously the families that had been through it all. And I think there was just a feeling within the team that they were ready.
The rest is history. The better team won. Australia 35, France 12.
And away goes Herbert. Horan's outside him. Joe Roth. Bernard Sallow getting across, hauling him down. The speedster from Biarritz. Penalty to Australia, offside. And a little altercation there. Tensions running high. Horan, again that lovely little shift of foot. Suddenly he's got the forwards in front. Eels by himself into the 22. Gregan being hauled in. It's going to be a penalty to Australia at very least. Set up by Tune, driven on by Kefu. Gregan, he wanted quick ball, he couldn't get it. And it's a penalty to Australia. Sets it again. Oh, beautifully through the middle. Rough through the middle. Is he there? No, he's just an inch short. What a wonderful move from the Australians. Driving on now, this is really dangerous. Oh, and Gregan looking the wrong way, then going himself. Horan, Finnegan. Try in the corner. I think it's Ben Tune who got over. And the Australians know that that's what could be the decisive moment. Ben Tune it is. There's our camera on the other side of the field to our normal coverage. Look at that. Right through the post. A great kick from Matt Burke. Suddenly, it's all open up. Australia 28, France 12. And that is it. Andre Watson become the first country to win the trophy twice.
Rugby's Everest had been conquered again by Australia. It could have been a perfect time for McQueen to pass the baton. World Cup victories are hard to top, and he admits that retirement was an option.
Well, most of the things that I had done since then, including the business plan that I put together and spoke to John O'Neill about, involved a get-out date. And I had significant talks with John about it at that time, and I had resolved to stay for that additional year to make sure that we had some stability in place. And it was a bit of a challenge, I suppose, because we had achieved our goal. But to keep the team up for that was going to be the next challenge, to make sure that we didn't rely on what we'd done in the past. So at that stage, I was going to go through to the end of the year and then call it quits.
The Wallabies, as expected, were treated like heroes when they returned home with the William Webb Ellis Cup. Life was looking good at the top of World Rugby, but the job wouldn't be complete without a Tri-Nations title and a series victory over the Lions for the first time. After the break, there's more from the Rod McQueen era. June 17th, 2000. The Wallabies were at Ballymore in Brisbane for the first of 10 tests that year. Queenslanders Tim Horan and David Wilson were playing their last international in their hometown, and the fans turned out to say their farewells. But it was another Queensland star who stole the show. Fullback Chris Latham running in a record-equalling 4 tries as Australia thumped the Pumas 53-6.
Try to Latham. 22 seconds. Regan now. Quick ball for the backs. David Giffen out there. Regan cleans up. Latham. Little. Latham on the look. He's got the pace. Scintillating. Chris Latham salutes 4X Hill. Cobain. Jeremy Paul. Nice little step, and what an offload to Latham. A hat-trick for the fullback. What a night for Chris Latham. Regan. Oh, what a pass. Latham gets number 4. A bit of magic there from Wee Georgie.
When the two teams clashed on one of those cold Canberra nights the following week, it looked like being a repeat of the Brisbane result when Joe Roff scored in the 9th minute. The Pumas had every right to be disheartened, but as they've done in the past when things have gone wrong, they reverted back to their strength, the forward pack. When Albanese made the initial break, the forwards carried it on, and eventually Corletto scored a morale-boosting try.
Out by Argentina. The try's on. Bartolucci is there. Fantastic counter-attack from the Pumas. Australia trying to slow it down. Argentina desperately needed quick ball there, but it was held in. Back it comes now for Pichot. Well, Albanese's the man who made that daring raid from inside his quarter. Celso, look at the power of the Puma forwards. The try's awarded.
Chris Latham scored his 7th try and only his 8th test to give Australia some breathing space. But by half-time, the Pumas had narrowed the gap to 21-17, and they got to within 1 point after the break. In the 68th minute, Sterling Mortlock crossed, and it looked like Australia would finally run away with it.
George Gregan now, the Wallabies with a good line. Kafer, lovely pass. Wilson, here he goes again, Sterling Mortlock. Can he do it? What a moment for Sterling Mortlock. His first test try in front of his home crowd.
But unlike the Brisbane test, the Argentinians were having a go, and the forwards were rewarded for some solid play with 8 minutes remaining.
Tremendous surge here from the Pumas forwards. There's the try. Straight through the middle. They've splintered the Wallaby pack.
Another Mortlock penalty sealed it for the Wallabies. They had survived the Puma onslaught, but only just. And after the Canberra wake-up call, it was off to Melbourne's Colonial Stadium to take on the Springboks. While it was an unofficial Tri-Nations encounter, there was plenty at stake. South African coach Nick Mellett decided to throw caution to the wind, calling for enterprising, attacking rugby to be played, against the wishes of the die-hard fans back home. It was all going to plan in the opening 30 minutes.
Fleck. Desperate tackle by Kafer. Referee has his hand out, possibly for offside. He's playing advantage. Swanepoel crosses for an easy 5-pointer. Welcome back to the Test Arena, Werner Swanepoel. Larkham, Kafer. Intercept for Pulsar, another 5-pointer South Africa. And there's a bit of patting on the back from Rassie Erasmus to Rod Kafer, saying good pass, mate. Set up by Voss. Montgomery came in. Kun now. Bounce important. Sterling Mortlock. He threw it away. It's another try. It could be a penalty try. It goes to Brayton Pulsar anyway.
Sterling Mortlock made up for his mistake minutes later to put Australia back in the match. But Rod McQueen knew his side would have to improve on their form so far if they were going to win the Nelson Mandela Plate.
Out wide for Kafer. Latham slips it away. Sterling Mortlock gets his second test try, and the Wallabies are back in business.
Australia's superior fitness came to their rescue in the second half, and they went on to win 44-23, equalling their record of 10 successive victories.
Chance on for the Wallabies here. Larkham. Larkham. He's done it. Referees. Still got his arm out for an advantage. Kefu. Another one, and that should sink the box.
Toto Kefu slips it back for Paul. Very strong game from the young hooker. Just his mobility has stood out.
Daniel Herbert almost there, and Jason Liddell gets Australia's fourth.
Accordingly goes in now for Larkham.
Here comes Mortlock. Sterling Mortlock gets his second try over the top of Chester Williams.
When the Tri-Nations kicked off a week later at Stadium Australia in Sydney, a world record crowd of 109,874 fans were on hand to see old rivals Australia and New Zealand do battle. What they saw was an extraordinary match, the majority believing that it was the best ever played. One side completely dominating early, the other coming back, only to be denied in injury time.
As a coach, it was a little unnerving. I had some new coaching staff with me, some new management as well, so things are changing. I think there was a number of the players had left, and there was going to be more to leave. So again, you know, in that game, I remember they scored right from the kick-off, and then they scored again. And as a coach, I was getting messages out to the field to John Earl saying, you know, we've got to get the ball, John. Make sure they get hold of the ball, and then, you know, 2 minutes later they'd score again, and I'd send the message out there. Now it's important we get the ball, make sure we get hold of the ball from this kick-off. Then about 3 minutes later, I think the score was up to about 14 points, and it was just good. I think I must have sent that message out about 12 times.
And another try coming up here for New Zealand. Alatini. Sensational. Alatini after 3 minutes, and the Wallabies don't go the 10 metres. The All Blacks play on. 2 tries in 3 minutes. What a start to Bledisloe 2000 and the Tri-Nations. They're finding some great gaps. Alatini again, and a third try to Cullen. It's raining tries here. It's a demolition at Stadium Australia.
Thankfully, when we did get the ball, we scored almost immediately, and that's what this team was very good. They were very good with the ball and hanging on to the ball. And you know, at halftime, we'd got the deficit back, and from then on, it was just it was a game of chess between the two sides.
He has Mortlock for a try. He's away. That's a great riposte from the Wallabies. John Eales. Gregan. Little gap here for Williams. Big Jim Williams. Can he get there? Wallabies striving. 1 metre short. Gregan now. Here it is. Mortlock. He gets his second. 7 to go. Great pass from Gregan. Little hammered there by Randall. Roth. 5 to go for Australia. Gregan to Larkham. Herbert almost through the gap. Gregan again. Latham. He's there. Third try for Australia. Australia control the ball. Gregan wants it. Larkham. Larkham. No way through there. Back through his legs. Williams and Gregan again. Delayed pass to Roth. There it is for Herbert. Just short. Gregan has his hands on it. He was tackled offside. Roth gets over. Great advantage by the referee. And the Wallabies incredibly draw level. Mertens goes high. Oh, some great work there by the All Blacks. His grip. Marshall. He's there. New Zealand have got it. Justin Marshall hit it at pace. Some very flimsy Wallaby defence, and the All Blacks back in the lead.
Larkham with great hands. Mix up. Little. Gregan. He recovers. George Gregan! The chance is on here for Jeremy Paul. Australia trailed by 4. What a break there by Gregan. Latham's out on the left, calling for the ball on the wing. Roth. Tore Kefu. 8 minutes to go. Australia now. Kafer. Paul! There it is! Let's wait for the referee. Has he awarded a try? Jeremy Paul kisses his hand. Andre Watson is happy. The Wallabies have hit the lead. 35-34. 2.5 minutes to go. Australia by 1 point. Alatini, Iramia. Sandwiched in midfield. Kelleher. Randall and Lomu. Can he do it? Larkham. Lomu has won the game surely for New Zealand.
Unfortunately, we lost, but you know, sometimes those things happen. I still remember it as a great game and one that you know, I'll always look back and say I enjoyed it, perhaps with the exception of the first 8 minutes.
It took a while for the winners, the narrow losers and the rugby public to come back to earth after a memorable night at Stadium Australia. But before the Wallabies could fly to Wellington to try to avenge the loss to the New Zealanders, they first had to overcome the Springboks. Unlike playing them in Perth, beating the South Africans on the eastern seaboard was never a problem in the Tri-Nations. And the match at Stadium Australia went Australia's way again. They won 26-6, scoring 2 tries to none.
Mortlock! That's his 6th test try in a very young career. And it was the staccato passing and the loop again of the Wallaby fly half. Gregan. Kefu. He's burst through. Latham's with him. What a pass there. Jason Little. Can Little do it in his final home test? I think he couldn't get over the goal line. Finally he does.
Jeremy Paul, all the work done by Little. JP gets one under the sticks.
Next up, Wellington. Australia needing a win to retain the Bledisloe Cup and to keep their Tri-Nations hopes alive. Unlike the Sydney Test, this time the Aussies poured on the early pressure and points, and then the All Blacks hit back.
Feeds it up, and Mortlock is chased by Umaga. He'll make it though. Now it's Larkham again. Kefu. Trib off into Latham, who's up in the line. They keep it going. Larkham. Joe Roth for the corner. Mertens for Trib. The kick to Cullen. Brilliant.
Beautiful ball to the back of the line out, giving some space.
Here they are, some intricate moves. Aaron Malista, Umaga.
Oh, classic.
That equals the record. That's absolutely brilliant again.
New Zealand led 20-18 at the break. It was a tryless second half, and with 2 minutes to play, the Wallabies were pinned deep inside their own half and trailing 23-21. In a dramatic finish, Australia won 2 lineouts against the throw. And when the All Blacks infringed, with first-choice goal kicker Sterling Mortlock off the field, John Eales was forced to kick for goal, and a victory. The rest is history.
Now, Joe Roth tries to go past Cullen. Oh, there's the penalty. There's the penalty. This kick will decide the fate of the Bledisloe Cup. What a player, John Eales. His kick has retained the Bledisloe Cup.
Sweet revenge. The Bledisloe Cup had been retained. Australia were still in the hunt to win the Tri-Nations for the first time, and Coach McQueen was happy that his side kept their composure and played for the full 80 minutes.
There's always a bit of luck in the game, but again, we'd worked very hard to get that sort of control that team had. The leadership within the side, not just John Eales, but there was a number of leaders within the side, George Greig and I think Herbie at that stage was involved. So we were getting to be a team that had a number of leaders, believed in themselves, and really just didn't give up until that final whistle had blown. And I always felt with that team, I was always confident with the team, no matter what time it was with the game, that while there was time, there was always hope.
The Springboks did the Wallabies a huge favour when they toppled the All Blacks in Johannesburg, turning the final Tri-Nations match into a promoter's dream in Durban. Australia were just one win away from their first title, but history was against them when they entered the Kings Park cauldron. They had never beaten the Springboks in a Tri-Nations match in the Republic. In a less than spectacular opening half, Australia scored the only try and led 13-6 at the break.
Space for Herbert. This is where he's dangerous. Still they come. Richard Harry now. Big drive from him. Jeremy Paul finding a bit of space for Latham. Can he get in?
The second half featured penalty kicks from both sides, and with Brown Van Straten on target, the Springboks led 18-16, 10 minutes into injury time.
The crowd will tell you the answer to this one. Has he got it? Yes, he has. Well, now it's just a question of holding on.
When a penalty was awarded to Australia, this time John Eales had no hesitation in handing the ball to Sterling Mortlock.
Well, it pretty much looks like it's not going to be a draw. Someone's going to win. Has Mortlock got it? Yes, he has. That's a vital kick.
Tri-Nation success at long last for the Wallabies. The trophy cabinet was now full, but the coach wasn't exactly jumping for joy.
Yeah, well, I don't remember too much about that second half, to be really honest with you, because I had a very bad back. I'd played a couple of games of golf during the week, I must admit to, and then went for a run. And I had a significantly bad back, and I didn't want to take any painkillers, but it was getting worse and worse during the game, and so I succumbed to a painkiller, I think, about half-time, just after half-time, and I had very bad memories of just trying to stay upright because I was having to lie back all the time through that game. So when the last kick went, I was in so much pain trying to see. I couldn't get my head up to the window to watch it go over. But that's more a personal thing. I think on a team perspective, again, it was a great game. It was difficult conditions. It was significantly the only game in my coaching career that I won, that I had a team win in South Africa.
The 2000 international season ended with a 3-test tour to Europe, and there was a changing of the guard in the Wallabies when they took on France in front of 65,000 fans in Paris. New faces were needed because Tim Horan, Jason Little and David Wilson had retired from Test football, while Richard Harry had retired from all rugby. On top of that, key players were struck down with injuries. The likes of George Gregan, Stephen Larkham and Ben Tune were missing. In fact, the Wallaby run-on side looked nothing like the 15 that started the World Cup final against France a year earlier. It was a trialless first half, Matt Burke kicking 3 penalties to give the Wallabies a 9-3 lead at the break. In a controversial decision by the match officials, the French were denied 3 points. The kick was waved away, but replays don't lie. 3 second-half penalties had the Wallabies in front 18-3, and when George Smith was sent to the sin bin for a high tackle, the French were able to score a converted try and a penalty goal, but Australia held on to win by 5, 18-13. They were rusty after a break of over 2 months, but Rod McQueen was happy to get a first-up win with a new-look team.
We had to start thinking about our next goals. Obviously, it was going to be the World Cup. And we'd done a bit of homework, actually, with some of the league teams, talking to Wayne Bennett, talking to Rick Charlesworth from the hockey type of situation where they'd been successful. And the most significant findings we got out of all of that was you've got to make some of those decisions earlier rather than later. And so when the opportunity came up for players like Timmy Horan and Jason Little, David Wilson, Richard Harry wanted to sort of either retire or further their careers overseas, we were able to let them go. They'd done a significant amount for Australian rugby, but it was time to bring some younger players on. I know that if those players had stayed, we would have probably had significant victories at the end of that year. But I'm also very sure that some of those players that came away with us, for instance, Smith, who played a lot of games, War came over and played a number of games, Lyons was over there with us, front row in Styles, etc. I'm sure that if those players hadn't played in those games, we would have been a lot more underdone when we came up against the Lions.
Next up, Scotland. And over 64,000 fans were at Murrayfield to see the locals turn on some early pressure. For the second test in a row, the Wallabies were having trouble finding the try line, and at half-time it was 3 penalties apiece. Then, at long last, things started to click when Chris Latham scored.
Wallabies and Latham. First try for Australia in 130 minutes of Test rugby.
Joe Roth was on the end of another good backline raid.
Flat pass. Numbers for Australia. Roth, 50th international in a row. And Big Joe Roth scores his 22nd Test try.
And the Wallabies finish with a flourish. Right winger Matthew Burke scoring this time.
Joe Roth, Latham's with him. And so too is Matthew Burke. Third try for the Wallabies.
Australia 30, Scotland 9. And it was off to Twickenham to see if they could make it 3 from 3 on tour. 74,000 fans braved the cold and wet conditions, and goal kickers Johnny Wilkinson and Matthew Burke traded penalties in the first half. But Wilkinson's drop goal gave England a 3-point buffer at the break. Joe Roth laid on the first try of the match for Matthew Burke.
Joe Roth! Try!
Matthew Burke!
Another Burke penalty had Australia in front by 19-12 before Wilkinson narrowed it to 4. Then the tide really turned. Chris Latham was sin-binned, and not long after that, Matt Cobain was shown the yellow card. And England had one last crack at victory. Luger winning the race for the ball in the in-goal, but did he get it down? The video referee said yes, despite the replay showing that there was plenty of doubt about the try. England had regained the Cook Cup. Rod McQueen didn't enjoy losing to England, but he wasn't about to cut his wrist. The rebuilding program was a success. Before he knew it, Rod McQueen was back at Camp Wallaby in Coffs Harbour, still at the helm and preparing to take on the British and Irish Lions, a touring team Australia had never beaten in a series. Retirement had been mentioned again, but he decided against it.
Yeah, again, I think that wasn't an easy decision. I discussed at length with John O'Neill the timing when I was going to leave, and we looked at some options. In the end, over a very long lunch, we decided that it was in the best interest to continue for one more year. And at that stage, I had decided to go through to the end of the Tri-Nations. But it was always going to be a difficult year because we had the Lions, and it was the first time that we had a goal, which was really virtually at the start of our season. Anything else we'd done, we'd had a significant amount of time to prepare. And when you looked at our side, one of the great advantages we had was our preparation, the fact that we did our homework and we made sure that we set our goals. Here was an opportunity to play against the Lions, who had 6 games under the belt by the time they were about to play us on a significant tour. And we were virtually coming out of Super 12 and virtually playing them straight away.
The Lions went onto the Gabba ground in Brisbane for the first test, and they were greeted with a sea of red. Many of their stars had played their way into some good form in the lead-up, while the Wallabies had just the one match against the New Zealand Maori, and it wasn't enough.
We just weren't prepared for that match. As much as you can talk about these things, sometimes mentally you just don't get up. We actually felt the preparation was very good. We significantly worked a lot on our moves and so on that we'd worked out from the Super 12 from the year before. In the past, what we'd done is we'd got together and worked it out together as to how we're going to go, but we didn't have time to do that, so we had to hit the ground running. So a lot of our tactics and our moves and so on were all devised from moves out of the teams that had played the Super 12, plus obviously some of the old moves that we'd used with the Wallabies. We got straight into that and I thought trained very well going into it, but nothing really prepared us well enough for what hit us up in the Gabba. I think the fact that the crowd was almost an away game to us, and also they played very well. They were a very good team, the Lions. The individual players within there in particular played exceptionally well on that day, and really we just didn't have an answer.
The Lions were on fire from the outset and scored 2 first-half tries.
They're attacking Australia out wide. Here's Robinson. He's around Latham. Oh, what a sensational start. So Halley works at short side. O'Driscoll. Robinson. And James. Second try for the Lions.
The tourists went on with the job in the second half, scoring another 2 tries to put the match out of Australia's reach.
All the way. A shocking miss by Matthew Burke. And a third try for the Lions. The Australian defence in big trouble here. Big overlap. Belshaw went himself. There was a 4-on-2 overlap. Stephen Larkham missed the tackle, but another one to the Lions. The Wallaby defence is in tatters.
The Wallabies put some respectability into the scoreline with 2 late tries, but while they were outplayed by the Lions on the night and down 1-0 in the series, Rod McQueen had 7 days to turn things around before the second test, and he wasn't about to panic, but a tough decision was made after plenty of soul-searching.
Very disappointed with our performance. John Eales and myself and George Gregan got together and had a long chat about things. Again, I'd actually spoken to my wife, Liz, about how I was going at that stage, and I'd made a decision that I wanted to go at the end of the Lions series, and that was for a number of reasons, but the most important one was that I really felt that I could go through to the end of the Lions. I felt that I could offer the team something through that period of time, but I really didn't feel that I could offer the team as much as Eddie Jones could after that time. He was obviously enthusiastic. Eddie had been with the team. He'd been sitting in on the selections, and I'd been sort of including him in a lot of the things were going along. On top of that, he was also involved in the Australia A program and was sitting pretty comfortably with him at the time. So I was pretty convinced that he was right and ready for it. And I was pretty convinced that it was ready in time for me to go. So I'd made that decision early on and spoken to John O'Neill over that period of time. And the only thing we really needed to discuss then was the timing of the announcement. I spoke to John Eales and George Gregan during the week and a couple of the management and told them the decision. And we decided it would be best to announce it after the game.
A big drive here from the Lions. They're going to score. Vickery's there. Let's see who comes up with it. Neil back.
Down 11-6 at the break, McQueen was quietly confident.
Again, a lot of the public, I think, and also a lot of the journalists talked about the fact we were behind at half-time or didn't look like we were playing that well and looked like the Lions were going to win. But it was quite different to the demeanour that was in the dressing room. We actually felt that we were on top. Every time we were getting down in their half, we were getting penalised and they were coming back again. So we felt that if we had put a few phases of play together, that we were getting on top, as opposed to some of the statistics that had been thrown up to us in the previous games that the Lions had played, that if they didn't score in the first couple of phases, that they started to lose a lot of their form and their composure, and they either kicked or knocked on or dropped the ball. So we had a determination to make sure that we really closed them down in those early phases, and they weren't then able to penetrate as they were in the first test. And the more that we played, as it turned out in the second half, the more that we got our phases together, the more we started to get on top. And that's where we sort of went away with the game, I guess, in the second half.
Here's Wilkinson. Intercepted. Joe Roth. Can he get there? Australia's pinched the ball. John Eales. Well, the Lions scrum folded. Gregan now. Larkham. Roth again. Joe Roth looking for number 2. Gregan again, quick ball to Finnegan. Here it is for Burke. Can he get it? Another one for the Wallabies.
The 3-test series was all square at 1-1, and McQueen dropped his bombshell to the team. The third test would be his last as Wallaby coach. And their reaction?
Wild cheers, I think, funny. No, they were pretty good. I've got to say that, no, they were very good. I had a lot of players come and talk to me during the night, which was always nice, you know, after a win like that. But I think in general terms they're pretty focused on the football. For me, it was a little emotional, but I think a bit of a load off my mind to know that, you know, it was out in the public now, so I didn't have to deny it because there's a few rumours coming out of the camp at the time, and it put that to rest and allowed us just to worry about that match the next week.
Sod was on to Sydney for his swan song and the series decider against the Lions.
Personally, it was a difficult week for me because I was being asked a lot about retirement and what it meant, etc. But at the same time, really just trying to make sure that I just concentrated on making sure we dotted the I's and crossed the T's as we do every week.
Here's Dawson and Wilkinson. There's 3-on-2 here. Overlap, it has to be a try. Robinson! Australia surging now. Great work by Gregan. Here's Walker. Roth and Herbert.
Australia had the upper hand at the break, but only just. The home side leading 16-13, and they traded tries in the second half to set up a nail-biting finish.
The Lions still have a big overlap on the rights. Leave it! Tode Kefu trying to get out there. Wilkinson takes it. Gregan again. Kefu. That's the goal line. Gregan wants it quickly. Here it is. It's a try number 2 for Daniel Herbert.
It was 23-all with a little over 10 minutes remaining, and the Wallabies went on to win 29-23.
It was an amazing second half. The scores were, you know, going backwards and forwards all the way through. The Lions were desperate to win, obviously, as were the Wallabies. We had some great support there. There's one thing that I remember, I think, from that match, and that is about 5 minutes from full time, sitting back and saying, if ever I have any doubts about doing the right thing, think about what your blood pressure is now, Rod, and never ever question your decision.
The Wallaby defence regroups. They punch away on the short side. Wilkinson, Foley, overlap. The try's on for James. Gregan arrives. The hoot is gone. It's general play, and this is it for Australia.
What a way to finish his Australian coaching career. A long-awaited series win over the Lions meant he would go out on a high.
It was really good, and I think again seeing this team achieve and being part of it was wonderful from my point of view. I think John Eales said some very nice things at the end of that, and gave me a jumper from the Wallabies, which is generally only reserved for players, and that was probably, thinking about it, one of the highlights of my coaching career.
The winning of the 1999 World Cup stands out as the obvious highlight in the Rod McQueen era, but there are other things that he'll cherish as well.
Another highlight was having my wife and son, as it turned out, over at the World Cup, and I got to see them just before I went downstairs when we won the World Cup, because obviously they'd suffered alongside with a lot of the other families over that period of time, and I managed to call my daughter on the phone over that period. But again, you know, nothing can beat setting a goal like we did for the World Cup, seeing the players achieve what they'd set out to do, the sort of joy that comes with success.
Rod McQueen was always the boss, and along the way he admits he probably rubbed a few people up the wrong way, but it was always for the good of the team.
Sure, I'm not the easiest person to get on with, because I'm always striving to get perfection, I suppose, as I go along. There was always highs and lows. I think I've always been a team man. I've always been part of a team in surfboat rowing when I played for Ringa and etc. Whereas here it's pretty lonely at the top being a coach, because you do have to divorce yourself a little bit from that. But having said that, you know, I've really got no regrets at all. It's been very good.
After guiding the Wallabies through 44 Test matches and winning every major trophy available, Rod McQueen is satisfied that he completed what he set out to do back in 1997.
I wanted Australian rugby to be better off from the time that I came in, and that there was a legacy there for the next coach, succession planning in place for the players and the coaches and structures and in place as we went along. We've had a number of personnel. I think in the time that I was involved with the Wallabies, we had a total turnover of management. We had probably 2/3 of the turnover of the team in that period of time, but we've managed to stay with a professional outfit, a good structure.
His coaching style was not out of any rugby textbook. While coaching the Wallabies, he applied the lessons he learned from his early years in rugby, from life in general, and from running a multi-million-dollar business. A formula he spells out in his book, One Step Ahead, on the field and in the boardroom.
It's a formula that I've worked with not only in this rugby area, but obviously through with my business and with surf boat rowing and so on as I've gone through. And it's been a lot of input from a number of different people. Get the best people in, bring them together in a unity situation, and see if we can achieve together. And hopefully that's now what Australians are all about.
So what will he be doing with his spare time, apart from working on his golf swing? Will he be a regular face in the crowd at rugby matches?
Yes, I'm looking forward to going and watching the odd game of rugby. I've certainly never sort of lost my passion for the game, and certainly not in a capacity from a coaching point of view, but certainly on the hill with a few friends, and probably on another level, probably from the point of view of looking at operations, etc., but certainly not in a full-time capacity.
No matter what involvement Rod McQueen has with the game in the future, he can rest assured that his name will live on in Australian rugby folklore. Came to an end at Stadium Australia on July 14th, 2001. Our most successful Wallaby coach summed up what it all meant to him in a few simple words.
It's bloody good to be Australian. Thank you.